To another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir alongside Mason Viner. Ahmed, Terps drop about as tough a one as you can drop tonight. Instant takes.
Yeah, obviously, last time we were here, we were talking about Maryland's arguably their best game of the season, probably undoubtedly their best game of the season at home on the road, and obviously playing at Ohio State last week. You kind of expected Maryland to play with a little bit more urgency. You knew Maryland was going to be banged up going into this week, but just still really felt like Maryland was better team on paper, but did not show that at all today from really start to finish. Defensively, offensively, there was just a lot that went wrong. Poor execution, bad penalties. Just really probably the most concerning loss of the season.
Yeah, by far. Done a lot of tough podcasts after a lot of tough moments of Maryland athletics. Tonight, though, you felt like with what Loxley said at the beginning of the season, they're ready to compete. They've gotten the program where they want to go. This just looks like a massive step backwards and going ahead into the bye week. I actually think the bye week comes at probably the worst time that it can come.
I think the bye week, I could see it really just kind of lighting a fire, just kind of with Maryland. Having 2 weeks to really look at this game tape and say this is the last game we played, maybe to have that kind of maybe light that fire under you. But yeah, like you said, obviously just kind of the way that Maryland played, I thought it was obviously just a really disappointing performance. It felt like the run game, felt like there were a little bit of shades of success. Roman Hemby was able to break off 17-yard run. I believe he finished with north of 70 yards there. But again, just really felt like Maryland had a chance to kind of solidify themselves, get back on track, and did a podcast at Sirius XM Radio earlier this week and kind of said that, hey, Maryland's probably that fourth best team pretty solidly in the Big Ten, and today they left that open for debate. Definitely just goes back to Terps versus Terps. Maryland didn't execute. Maryland didn't do the things they needed to do. The result showed.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the offense. Obviously, injuries up front coming into the day. We saw Kyle Long almost, tried to give it a go there between the first and the second quarter. Then at halftime, he went in and did not return to the game.
Yep.
Emilio Moran stepped back into his spot. Gotti Edzi moved to guard. Connor Fagan back into the lineup. And ultimately, I didn't think it had that big of an effect on Maryland. The Terps just never really able to get over the hump in the passing game tonight.
Yeah, there were a couple plays, obviously a couple with Ty Felton, a couple where it felt like the timing was there, just maybe a yard or step that were just kind of off there. But yeah, really the big plays downfield that weren't there. Again, we talked about just kind of the running game. Roman Hemby was able to break off a 17-yard rush there. That proved to be his longest rush of the game. In a game where Maryland really had a chance to establish some momentum on the ground, especially going against an Illinois team that ranked dead last in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed, especially considering the conditions. Obviously, the rain itself held up a little bit during the game time, but just kind of a missed opportunity, like you said. And again, just the lack of explosiveness through the air. Really felt like Illinois was able to kind of put the clamps on and keep that offense pretty horizontal.
Yeah, I felt like in the passing game, I liked a lot of the calls. I liked the deep shots in the direction of Caden Prather. I always feel like I walk away of every game this year thinking that Jayshon Jones really should get more opportunities with the football. Yep. Liked Octavian Smith's involvement. I think the Terps got a lot of bright spots in their tight end room right now, but as a unit, they just did not get the job done, especially on third down where they struggled today, basically nonstop, especially there at the end of the game.
Yeah, I noticed there were a couple of incompletions. Obviously, Corey Dyche just being absent today, that's a big loss, especially just a very reliable target for therefore Talia. There were a couple plays. First it was Preston Howard, then it was Rico. First it was Rico, then it was Preston Howard, where you could tell that the timing was just slightly off. Talia expected Rico to take another couple steps into that soft spot, and Rico just sat right in there. So that led to that incompletion right there. So I think, when you talk about when Loxley's mentioned that tight end room, really felt really confident in the future of that position. You can kind of start to see the flashes. I think today kind of showed some of, maybe the areas of growth or areas of improvement for those some of those young guys. But obviously, Dyche, that's a big production level to replace. Maryland just couldn't do that.
No, they couldn't on the defensive side of the ball. We talked about it. We've talked about it nonstop on the pod. That cornerback room after those first two guys, somebody has got to step up at this point because that arguably lost them the game today.
Yeah, and I thought that Maryland did a really good job kind of early on. Generated 5 sacks on the day, I believe three of them were on third down. Fanaje Gote accounted for two third down sacks. So Maryland was able to do some good things on defense. It was just that one big play that they allowed, or hands to the face that, there probably may have been a holding or 10 against Quayshawn Fuller that could have been called. But face mask against others, late hit on Jayshawn Barham that extended the drive. There were just the lack of discipline throughout the game, and that's what kind of came back to really bite Maryland in the end.
Yeah, I thought that Glenn Miller did a fantastic job stepping up for Dante Trader. I don't really think, other than on special teams, where Trader has been a bright spot. And that's one thing that I feel like needs to be pointed out. Loxley talked about the lack of ability to stop the big returns. If you don't watch it closely, you won't realize that Dante Trader most of the time is down there making plays on special teams. Tarheeb Still is also on special teams going both ways. You saw some different guys in there kind of filling spots, knowing that guys had to step up in those starting spots, and they didn't want them out there on the field on those violent special team plays. Ultimately, though, just not enough in that phase of the game.
No, not at all, obviously. I mean, again, just kind of with Tarheeb Still obviously being sidelined. Corey Coley struggled a little bit, a couple defensive pass interferences on the perimeter there. Again, it just really felt like that Maryland just, it was just those one or two plays. Again, we were able to talk about just them being able to win in the front seven, generate that pressure, get Luke Altmaier disruptive and out of the pocket, but just really weren't able to do it over a 6-minute stretch there.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I feel like there is credit that is due to this defense in this game. They gave the offense many opportunities to win the game in the end. They couldn't hold on. Fanaje Gote, a guy who I believe deserves a huge shout-out after this game, especially late in the game. I mean, he had a play where he absolutely demolished the Illinois running back that was hanging in the block. I mean, he is definitely a bright spot. That inside linebacker room continues to impress, but ultimately the defensive line, I think, had their lowest win rate of the season, despite being able to generate pressure at times. Illinois' almost classic hard-style Big Ten run the ball right at you definitely took a toll on this team. And really, where do you move forward? I mean, obviously the bye week coming up next week, then a trip and an expected win that will be coming up in Evanston, but
I don't know. I mean, that Northwestern game, I think a lot of people looked at them after Pat Fitzgerald got fired and said, hey, that's probably an easy win. Same way you looked at a lot of schools that go through those early coaching turnover. Northwestern hasn't done that. I think that's still a little bit of a classic Northwestern team, especially being on the road. I don't think that I'm going into anything where I think Maryland will be an automatic win. I think this is kind of, when you talk about what Maryland needs to do, obviously it goes back to just getting healthy. Obviously losing Corey Bullock, Corey Dyches, Tarheeb Still, a lot of those guys. Riyad Wilmot was another guy who was absent today, and he's been a guy that he's quietly made some plays off the edge there, especially in run support. So I think that getting a lot of those guys back, but I think it's kind of holding each other accountable, realizing, hey, you look at the schedule, you got Penn State, you got Michigan, so get it together.
Yeah, last point for me, and one that if you've listened to this pod for a long time, you've definitely heard me say, I've been coming to these games basically since the day that I was born. I've sat in 206 in my seats and been very loyal to this program, come to these games, and you hear Loxley talk about the standard, and you heard him say they didn't meet it today. And as somebody that spent hours watching this team, Ahmed, you spent hours covering this team, you just really expected them to get to this moment, win this game, good in the bye week, get healthy, beat Northwestern, and be back here with a legitimate, game that people will be watching when they came back for Penn State. But yet again, like Purdue last year, missed opportunities on our field in crossover games that the honest expectation is that you should win. And today, 13.5-point line when the game kicked, 14-point line all week. And we talked about it on the podcast and probably gave some very poor gambling advice on the podcast as well. You just can't do that and expect people to show up to the stadium. You can't do that and expect things to get better around here.
Yeah, I think in years past, obviously you mentioned the Purdue game last year. I think, those are games where you kind of look at it and you're like, those are 50-50 games that Maryland should win, and you watch it and it's just clearly Maryland letting the game slip away. This year, I've said it multiple times behind enemy lines on national radios. I've long believed that this Maryland team is different, and they showed it through those first 4 or 5 weeks. unfortunately, today showed that it's the same old Maryland.
Yeah, and I think that's where we'll leave it. We've got basketball pod coming up this week in the bye week. We probably will talk a little bit of football. I mean, we have a lot of things, a lot of injuries to really watch on this list, and I think that is going to be one of those difference makers come 2 weeks. And you mentioned it. I mean, Northwestern, they have the former North Dakota State defensive coordinator as their head coach now. That guy is a proven winner. He's won a lot of football games up there, and he's starting to bring that to Evanston. So you're right on that one. That's going to be a tough game.
Yep.
As always, follow us on Twitter at Inside the Black and Gold, at Young Terp 1. Make sure to subscribe to InsideTheBlackandGold.net for all of your Terps insider coverage. Like and subscribe to the podcast. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.